The Academy of Esports podcast is brought to you by LeagueSpot. LeagueSpot, your brand, your league, your way.
Welcome to the Academy of Esports with James O'Hagan. He's on fire. Boom shakalaka.
Welcome to the Academy of Esports podcast. I am your host, James O'Hagan. The Academy of Esports is sponsored by LeagueSpot. LeagueSpot, your league, your brand, your way. And I am with the editor and founder of the Esports Advocate, James Fudge. James, thank you for being a guest on the Academy of Esports podcast today.
It's my pleasure.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure, James. I've been a fan of you as a journalist and of your writing. I feel that I'm honored that you have chosen to be a guest here on the Academy of Esports podcast, especially since we speak mainly to students, teachers, educators, those trying to get young people involved in gaming beyond the games in a lot of ways. And I think journalism is one of those areas that unfortunately in the recent years has been under attack, especially when we talk about local journalism and esports journalism. Even as gaming and esports have grown, it's become a space and a place where there has been actually a reduction, it seems, or a consolidation in a lot of ways of some of the outlets, especially, we think about ESPN several years ago shuttering their entire esports division. But before we get too deep into the conversation, James, I want to first kind of introduce you and ease you into the conversation with our guest, our listeners here. I have some get to know you questions that I like to ask our guests.
Yeah.
And so, first question: what is a game, and it doesn't have to be a video game, that stands out as having been important to you at some point in your life? Why was the experience meaningful?
Well, I would say Quake from id Software. Quake really is why I'm doing this 25 years later. I played it and I loved it. And it led to me being interested in mods and the modding community. And so I started to really follow that. And then I decided one of my favorite sites started by Steve Heslop. It's called Blue Zoos. I started sending him tips and stuff. And so like he would put my stuff on there and I'd get my name on there. And then, about 6 months or a year later, he recommended me to an IDG magazine called PC Games. And I've been in the industry ever since.
And I guess, when we're thinking 25 years ago, so 98,
96, 97.
Okay. I'm a child of the 80s, grew up, and we had things like Nintendo Power Magazine. And again, there was a lot of physical magazines you could buy, but it seems that, when you think about journalism, there was a lot of stories that would be written, a lot of trade stories, it would seem. But before we get in too much deeper, it seems like the seriousness, I guess, of the topics, or the importance of gaming topics, especially now with the social impact that we're seeing with them. Have you seen an evolution from the time starting with Quake to where you are now?
Well, I think the community has changed. It used to be mostly, young males. And now it's, it touches everybody. Gaming wasn't as popular in the 90s as it is now. Like every household has some type of gaming device, whether it's a phone or a console or a computer. So like it has really invaded society, and on a global basis, really. So, but I mean, right now we're kind of struggling with inclusion. It's gotten a little bit better over the last few years, but how the community treats people that are different. So I think that's something that we're working on and we're making strides in. So that's kind of where we're at today.
Well, it is nice to be able to find somebody else who can remember. First of all, can remember the '90s, much as such as
Right.
myself. When we talk about games and this such, and for those of you who may be listening who do not know a whole lot about Quake, Quake is probably what the. I'm trying to think of, outside of going to an arcade, people were setting up tournaments and renting places and spaces to play Quake, bringing PCs, which I think Quake was. Would you say Quake was probably the first real game that people would bring their computers to a location? Like, I mean, we're not talking like laptops, and we're not talking these things being light.
Right.
These were like 50-pound, 60-pound machines. Would you say that that was the first game to your memory that people would travel and set up and bring their stuff from home?
Well, maybe Doom before that, but not
Mm.
so much as Quake. And I would say this about Quake: we wouldn't have games like Counter Strike if it wasn't for Quake, because we wouldn't have Half Life if it wasn't for Quake. And I don't know if a lot of people know this now, but like the development of Half Life started on the Quake engine, and then later, they made their own engine. But like, so Gabe Newell saw Quake obviously, and said, "I want to make a game," and so he licensed the engine, and he left Microsoft to license the engine, and built Half Life. And then, later the community built, you know, they built things like Capture the Flag and Team Fortress, and then, obviously Counter Strike, which Valve was smart enough to all, go out and say we want to own this, and the rest is kind of history when it comes to esports.
Yeah,
So,
in my memory, it was when I bought Half Life 2, I also got this game called Counter Strike Source, and I'm thinking like,
right.
what am I going to do with this? And then I started working with some people at Best Buy, and then it turned into these all night gaming sessions of Counter Strike Source. I even when people say, "Oh, do you play Counter Strike?" I go, "Yeah, I play Source." And actually, I will, and again, admit this to the audience, and I'm admitting it to James as a journalist. I have a VAC ban on my Steam ID because I did a little naughtiness with Counter Strike Source by turning on an aimbot and seeing through walls. I wanted to see if it worked.
Right.
It worked, and then they quickly figured out what I was doing, and I got my account banned. So if you go onto my Steam, you will see. I think I'm up to 5,000 plus days since my last ban, but yeah, that's the one game that I have been. I tried something nefarious in my youth and lost out.
Well, we've all been there.
Second, get to know you question. Maybe it's totally eccentric, or maybe it's quite traditional. But what is your superpower? What is that thing you do better than most people, or what do you wish you could do?
I guess my ability to function on 2 to 3 hours of sleep at a time, because I check in. I'm really passionate about covering this space, so I'll check in during European time, during India time, Southeast Asia. So the ability to do that and function, and you know and it kind of sounds like bragging, and I don't really like that, but um, I can put together a breaking story pretty quickly. So I can edit somebody else's breaking story, add context to it, and get it out pretty quickly.
So, as far is that a copywriter? Is that what they call those in journalism, or is that what I'm thinking of as the term?
Line editor or copy editors.
Okay.
Copywriters tend to write copy for like marketing and stuff like that.
Oh, I guess that makes sense.
But yeah, and I would also say I always try and be nice to people. So I do a lot of networking, and so I have a vast network, and it's very very handy. You never know. You should always be nice to people, because you never know where they're going to be working, and so if you're mean to them, that has an impression on people that lasts for a long time. So you should always try and be nice.
I have found, and maybe it's because working as an educator for as long as I do, and again, you work with kids, and sometimes you see the potential, and sometimes you don't. And
Right.
again, I can't believe I was started teaching in 1999, and knowing now that the kids who I taught back then were fifth graders, 10 years old, are now 33. You
Right.
know, and with kids and married and in jobs, and it's amazing how in this space what I've seen are these people, these kids who come to you, especially a lot of in the collegiate scene, who want to reach out and they want to pick your brain and talk to you and find out what you know, and ask advice. And a lot of these kids, I keep saying kids because everybody's younger than us,
Right.
is yeah, that it's having that respect because of again, this is such a new field, this is such a new area, and I'm sure you've seen it and covered it too in your journalism work, of just how quickly something can change on a dime, whether it's a company or even just, what was it yesterday, there was it was 100 Thieves laid off a number of people. And that's not to say those people were bad or anything like that. It's just that the market is shifting, and those people who got laid off could go off and start something brilliant and be productive and add to the space as well too. It's just that fast around here, it seems.
Yeah, it's gonna be a tough year, I think. But I do think when all of the pain of these layoffs and these some of these companies that won't make it to the end of 2023, the industry is going to be better for it.
Sorry, my cat just decided to claw my leg.
That's okay.
Yeah, and so as you're answering, I've caught a hypodermic needle tearing into my pants. Um, all right, name a song. It's that one. Whenever it hits your speakers, you're going to sing along to it.
I would say Creedence Clearwater Revival's "Fortunate Son," and that's because it really represents kind of how I grew up, and no one gave me a break. Um, I had to find my own way. So, um,
And I think you've had a pretty interesting journey as
oh
far
yeah,
as your pathway to becoming a journalist. When we spoke, it wasn't journalism that you started out with. You're in the construction trades, but again, it was your passion and your love for Quake in particular,
right.
that has led you to where you are. And I know that there's probably a number of students and teachers who are advising their own students right now about the pathway that and there's great journalism schools. Northwestern, Missouri
Right.
have great journalism programs, but given the state of journalism today and the return, it's not like every town anymore, unfortunately, has a local newspaper or something. It's almost like a struggle as to it's almost very scary to decide, I guess, in a lot of ways, should I get started? You were, again, when you started, there was a lot more, again, local journalism was still a thing. There was still a lot more resources.
Right.
But again, I think you've found a really interesting way to get through. And again, that fortunate son analogy is, I think now, especially in this day and age, when it comes to journalism, it's like, yeah, I don't have a silver spoon. I don't have a massive, New York Times or Wall Street Journal budget. It is getting down to it and scrapping and again, building networks and connections with people and trust. Would that
Yeah,
be
and
fair to say?
yeah, I think so. And I would say, there are opportunities that aren't local newspapers, but there's websites everywhere that are looking for young talent. But and some of them are questionable, obviously, and so you have to take that into consideration. Some of them are like internships because they don't want to pay you. But I mean, if you're willing to do that, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Just try and learn as much as you can. And my advice for people that do want to get in this space, and I don't know why they would want to. Honestly, it's not. You're not going to get rich, or anything. So if that's your goal, then maybe look elsewhere. But I would say read good writing. Read good writers. Read good publications. Learn how to craft sentences and paragraphs and stuff. You don't have to. You should go to college if you can, but if you can't, there's plenty of resources that you can use to learn how to be a better writer. So,
and again, for those high school teachers and high school students who may be listening to that, it is talking to your teachers. We love it when you come to us and say, hey, I want to be a better writer, and take the feedback and actually edit and do it. And again, this kind of leads into a bit of the conversation today. Again, the Esports Advocate is a new website that you put together to report on esports news. You also have your Substack, which again, if you're somebody who's new into the journalism field, having your own Substack and developing or a Patreon type system where you can write and people can pay for your content to support it if they wish is another great way. I know you do that. Jacob Wolf is another great esports writer who does that. But why, again, is I think it's important to talk about why you started the Esports Advocate. I know that there's a few news websites right now, but touch on that for a second, if you will, about why you decided that we needed another. Not saying it like that, but why we need another.
We need another friggin' news site, right?
Yeah.
But I would say we have sites like Esports Insider, and they do a great job of covering everything. And we have sites like Deserto that cover really a broad range of topics. But we don't have anything that's really focusing on the business of esports and things that are tangentially connected to them. So I really wanted to create a focus publication that's gonna, dive deep into some of these topics that are important, like what's going on this year with the esports industry, why companies fail, why they're succeeding in this really terrible economy. And so obviously I'm a little bit of a control freak, so I want better writing and journalism to happen, I guess. Like real, like track, just doing journalism, reaching out, talking to people instead of just writing a story.
Well, and here's something I know we talked about in our pre-conversation. I'm not going to get into too many of the specifics, but about, I guess, the process, right? Because you can have a great story that's presented to somebody. A reporter can say, yes, I'm going to get on this. I'm going to start to work through it. And then all of a sudden, some of these stories make it to print or onto a website, and others sometimes are stopped for a variety of reasons. And I know you really educated me on kind of the process. So once a story kind of has legs, if you will, and you're working on this, when you are, other than before, obviously now you have your own news site, you can kind of get to decide this, but what would make you pause, or what might make you not put something out there into like onto your news site about, again, esports and the business of?
I would say if you can't confirm some of the facts, you shouldn't just run with it. Speculation's terrible. It's, you're doing a disservice to the topic, to the company or person or organization that you're writing about. You have to be honest. You have to have real sources, and you have to talk to people. You have to pick up the phone and call people and just work sources and find information that may be hidden. So I would say if you can't prove it, like if you have no way to prove it, even if you're not showing the reader what that is for whatever reason, you shouldn't run it. So,
but what about, again, I don't want to, it's important to talk about what journalism is. And then of course there's the Twitter, what do we want to call it? Citizen journalism. We've seen it many times, especially in, the gaming industry when people share their experiences in an almost, from their, just narrative, right?
Right.
How they see things and how things played out. And we've seen what that can do to some careers, whether it's accurate or if it's not, in worst case, when it's not, especially what it can do. How would you, if I was somebody who thought there's something that's really important and I need to discuss it or share this story, and I don't want to just put somebody on blast, with a twit longer or something like that, where everything is laid out there. How would they approach you to come and propose the story?
Well, they'd find.
I think people think that you have your finger on everything and you're going to figure it out whether they know or not. How do you, I guess, come across stories? Is it mostly people coming to you, or is it you going out and finding where they are?
I read a lot of stuff on a lot of platforms, and sometimes you pick up little hints or breadcrumbs of things, and sometimes it's just blatantly obvious. But yeah, some people do come to me and say, I have this, I know about this thing, you should look into it, or so. And I have, like, right now I probably have 5 things I'm looking at that that people have come to me with, or I found on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever. So I read a lot, though. I read so much stuff every day.
Well, as you said, you're somebody who almost has to have a 24-hour news cycle in and of yourself. Where do you go? You said Twitter, you said LinkedIn. Are there other places that you go to start looking for these breadcrumbs? And if you have your secret place, like your secret fishing hole, you don't have to share that. But
no, I'm not gonna share that. But I do read other websites, that cover the space, and I properly credit them if I find something, which you should do always. Always credit, even if you hate the other site, credit. Always credit, because that's important. Don't take other people's work and make it your own. That's just kind of unethical. But yeah, so I look at other websites. I look at social media. I Google. I look at Google. I look at Bing.
Nobody looks at Bing. No, I'm just kidding.
They should. I mean, I'm not endorsing it as a search engine, but there is information there. So,
one of the other questions I have for you today, and this was one you wanted to pursue, and it was and the question is, do you have a story about how gaming has changed your life or someone else's? Now, it could be something. I want to give you an opportunity to speak directly to that question, however you want to interpret it. But I would also ask that, has there been something from your reporting, maybe a story that you reported that has impacted somebody's life to your knowledge? And I'll just throw that as a caveat or an additional thought question, but you can take the question as you wish.
Well, maybe not a story, but there was another guy, and I can't remember his last name, but it was Hanif. I think he's a banker or something now, or a venture capitalist working in Pakistan. But he was kind of doing the same thing I was doing with the Quake news, and instead of getting agitated with him, I helped him out. I gave him tips, and so, like, he remembered that 10 years later. He caught up with me and he remembered it, and so, like, it gave him some confidence, maybe, or inspired him to do what he's doing now. But yeah, I mean, it goes back to being nice to people. Like, people do remember that, and if you can help somebody, and it's and it's not going to be an undue burden on you, you should help people when you can. Oh, and listen, I don't care if I had 50 million followers, right? If some young guy or girl came to me and asked me for advice or asked me for help, and I can do that, I will always do it.
Yeah, I think, again, of the students with which I work, and again, to reiterate, you look at that 16-year-old and you go, man, I don't know what they're going to become. And a lot of times it surprises you,
right,
what that person will become or who they will become. and we can never, excuse me, we can never forget that. Has there been a story, and this is a audible question, has there been a story that you've covered that just you were so happy that you got to just report it? Like you were like, oh man, I am so glad I get to share this story with everyone.
Well, I would say, and a lot of people were like, why the F are you covering this? But the stuff with TikTok when the previous administration decided that they were going to try and ban it in the United States. You know, at that time, a lot of esports organizations and game companies were just starting to use the platform to, you know, to promote their stuff or to try and make money. And so I just started covering it. And I thought, I was so glad that I covered all of that. And, you know, eventually they bought Moonton, who makes Mobile Legends Bang Bang. And now, you know, show me an esports organization that's not on TikTok. So, like, imagine if it had been banned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the
and I want to add something. Also, it did lead to Riot Games and Activision getting letters from the Committee on Foreign Investments in the United States asking them what they did with user data. So it did lead back to esports and gaming.
And I think, again, what you just alluded to is that while you're a journalist first, right?
Right.
Because your focus is in Quake, well, it started in Quake, didn't mean you can't report on other things, right? A journalist is a journalist. They are somebody who can find a story and present it in a way that is interesting and exhibits the newsworthiness of it. It doesn't mean that you, just because you're the sports journalist, doesn't mean you can't share a story where, and we see it all the time with sports. Look at the Damar Hamlin story. Yeah. That has transcended sports. In fact, I was talking with a cousin of mine in Ireland who doesn't know anything about the NFL, but he knows about Damar Hamlin. And I was very, because he lives in very rural Ireland. And I was like, you know about this story? And again, it's these stories that, as you talk about just now, just because it's gaming doesn't mean there isn't a human interest. There doesn't mean that there's not something else there that can, again, transcend the subject matter material. Data privacy in our day and age in all of its forms is something that should be explored and asked questions of, especially as even with companies that say they have a third-party connection, right? Terms of service. Those things are free and should be questioned, as an example. What other questions to follow up on, look into? Parents, how can parents, in your mind, use gaming to better connect with their kids? Again, you've been doing this since 1996, but I mean, you were a gamer probably before then, correct?
Oh yeah, the first game I played was Pong. I played Asteroids in the arcade and Donkey Kong, and so that was a very, very costly. When you don't have money, arcade games are pretty costly. So it was a costly adventure every time. But so I've been playing for a long time.
I was lucky to get a quarter from my grandfather when we would go to the Garden City pool in Long Island. I'd get 1 quarter. That was it. Where did you grow up? You were in East Coast, right? North New England?
Yeah, I grew up in upstate New York.
Okay.
And Vermont. We moved around a lot, so.
Yeah, and I would imagine that it wasn't like finding an arcade. Well, actually, isn't it? No, it's New Hampshire where the big, I guess the big arcade now is. I forgot the name of it. It's a place I want to go to, but yeah.
No, in Vermont, there's like one store in the town, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, a bunch of cows and some farms and maybe one little tiny store. You have to go to the big city to get anything. So, yeah, no arcades.
Though I will say, for you young people who are listening, you would find in the 80s especially, you would find arcade games in the strangest of places. There would be people who, grocery stores would have arcades, not hardware stores, pharmacies, Pizza places was, they still, sometimes you see them at pizza places now still. What was the strangest place you ever saw an arcade game?
I'm trying to think.
And if it's not like strange, then it's just one of the,
seeing it in the grocery store was kind of weird. Bars, a lot of bars had them.
yeah.
It's weird to see them in a bar actually, because back then people weren't, there weren't a lot of arcade enthusiasts at bars. They were there to drink.
Yeah.
So they weren't. That's changed now. Everybody kind of games, but back then, yeah, kind of odd. But
Yeah.
the grocery store, I remember seeing after Super Mario Brothers came out on the NES, they had a Super Mario game in the arcade, which I thought was really bizarre.
Yeah, that was a straight NES port too. It was like they didn't, and it's like you could play on a quarter. You got through level 8-3, you won. Okay, cool. Yeah, that was a strange one.
If it looks like I have crazy eyes, it's because the camera's in a weird angle because I'm doing some construction on this office and it's a mess.
No, so, you don't have to. You don't have to explain that at all.
So I'm trying to figure out where the camera is because I moved it. I'm used to having it in a certain place, but.
Now, over the 25 plus years that you've been covering gaming, starting with Quake, there's obviously been a cultural shift, not just in how games are accepted, but who is playing them, or I guess you could say openly playing them, because it seems like there were a lot of, especially in the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s, there were a lot of closet gamers, especially when we're talking about females. Right. Who would, never admit to, but you could find that there were, for lack of a better phrase, girl gamers. What should we all be doing right now to make the ideas of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion the status quo in gaming? And again, you're covering a lot right now, and I know you probably see the good and the bad in this. So what are some of your thoughts right now around DEI?
Well, when it comes to the actual esports industry, I would say there's a lot of talk about diversity and inclusion, but you can tell that it's not serious talk, because if it was serious talk, you would see more women, people of color, and transgender people in executive roles. And I always say, like, I want to see organizations that don't look like me but look like more representative of what society is. Mm-hmm. So, more people of color, more transgender people, more women. So I don't think that's happening in esports. And so we have to stop giving lip service to things, social issues, and, start implementing them if we're serious.
I look at, again, one of the companies that I think of when you talk about that in particular is XSET. XSET, again, being a brand, more of I guess you could say a lifestyle or brand, not so much a competitive company. But even with the best of intentions, my own personal experience from going into their Discord when they first launched was racism was right there when I stepped into it. And I'm not saying that that's the case now. Right. But the culture, it's almost like the sexism and the racism it's one of the things that we in the scholastic space try to push against. How much do you feel of the DEI talk? It sounds like from what you're saying, and again, I don't want to put too many words in your mouth here, journalist. You can, I'm sure you could write circles around me. But when you talk about that, does it feel to you in your mind reporting on these things, does it feel more like marketing, or does it feel like it has real teeth? And if it does have real teeth, what is an indicator to you? Is it just having a person in a position, or is there something else that you look for?
It's not only about having a person in a position, it's about actually listening to that person and setting policy that, that reflects diversity and inclusion, right? Mm-hmm. You can't have someone get better compensation because they're a white guy and then, not have the same thing for women. I mean, that hasn't changed really in corporate America. Women still do get paid less than men.
So when you as a journalist then are talking to these companies who may say either on or off the record to you, oh, we're doing such great things for DEI and blah, blah, blah. And I guess this is something too that, as we're talking to young people who may want to step into this field, how do you, I guess, not just take them at their word? How do you, again, you may feel that they're kind of leading you on or trying to, journalism isn't like you're having a conversation with a friend. You're trying to get a story. You're trying to get truth. How do you get truth when you're like, if you recognize that what they're saying may be complete hogwash, for lack of a better phrase that I can use on this podcast. I mean, it's got to be uncomfortable sometimes when you're talking with these people. And again, I want to make sure that kids who are considering getting into this realize that the journalism is again getting to truth, and you have to have your sensors on. How do you have your sensors on?
Well, I mean, all you have to do really is look at, what the makeup of the company is. You can go look. I do want to give credit to Guild Esports, who, they had a bunch of recent hires, and I think all of them were women. So, and they were executive roles. So, like, we need to see more of that. Yeah, I kind of want to backtrack a little and
sure.
say that XSET, XSET really is, they have Simon in an executive role and an ownership role, and they do, they really care about diversity and inclusion. So, probably it's tough to control a community, especially when you're starting out. So, I think that community has probably changed since you went into that Discord server.
Literally, it was probably the first week. I saw the story that they did on them in the New York Times. I went, okay, I'm going to go check this out. And again, I believe, especially with somebody like Ashley working there as well too, and representing the company, Aaron Ashley Simon. Sorry, I know that what they are doing is, I believe, at least from what I can tell and see, is real. But again, from the conversations I've had and the conversations I'm sure that you have had, it's you don't have to go sometimes too deep in the layers to find where the marketing ends and the truth begins.
Right.
And it seems like there's a lot, and that's the trick with this, right? There seems to be a lot of money on the table. It's a gold rush in a lot of ways. The marketing, yeah. I mean, are we seeing now again, the 100 Thieves announcement where they're laying off a number of people? Are we getting to the end of the phase where sponsorships and are going to largely, and I think they are largely ending, and we are not going to be funding people's lifestyles anymore? I mean, that's what these brands have become. They've become less gaming companies and more lifestyle companies. Are we seeing the end of the lifestyle era of esports gaming companies?
I don't know about the end of the lifestyle era, maybe as you just defined it, but I would say we are going to see the end of crazy spending. We're gonna see some correction maybe in what players are paid, and people that are terrible at management are gonna be found out. I mean, and some of these companies are going to go out of business. So that's just reality this year, and it's terrible, and people are going to lose their jobs. But that's reality. But I think what rises from, whatever companies survive this and pay attention to what's going on and learn from it are going to be around for a very long time. Like the survivors are gonna be here many, many years from now. The industry is not going anywhere. It's just going to have a reality check.
In my perception, I see that it seems like I hate to use the phrase adults in the room, but it feels like there's more of a tendency now for there to be more adults in the room. That I think the FTX collapse is an example, not of the gaming industry, but as an example of that, there's going to be a new normal, and the giving a bunch of kids a bunch of money because they play video games really well and saying, okay, we want you to enter a bunch of tournaments and win a bunch of things, I think is going away. And so,
I mean, some people believe it's going to go back to grassroots, and some of it will, just playing, the joy of competing and teams working together and all of that stuff. So, and maybe it will, but I don't think the big money esports organizations are going to disappear. They're just going to be better run. So they're gonna, if they learn from their mistakes, they're going to be run better, and they're going to survive.
As part of
and all the people that were like doing a cash grab and creating these silly companies are going to go bankrupt. It's over. It's over for them.
Well, as a part of making experiences for young people better through collaboration, is there an organization or person doing great things in the field that you want to give a shout out? Like, who's a journalist, a fellow journalist who you look at and go, boy, I really love reading their stuff, or maybe a website that you say, boy, I really love reading their stuff.
I love Jordan Freegan over at GameSpy. She's an awesome writer, and she really puts a lot of work into everything she does. So if you're not reading her, you should. For diversity and inclusion, real honest talk, Marcus
Howard.
Yeah, Marcus Howard. Oh boy, he's gonna be mad that I forgot his last name. But he really is, sincere and honest, and especially when it comes to investment in the space for Black-owned esports companies. Like, really honest guy, really thoughtful, lots of insights there. Chris Smith, if you want to see how to do content on different platforms, he's incredible. He's with Big out of Australia, and
he used to just do it on his own.
Right.
I mean, he was literally, and then all of a sudden he was doing something every day on LinkedIn. He was always just every day there was like an hour, and it was just really good content. It was always solid.
Yeah, but I mean, his posts, his videos are good, and he's going to be doing what he calls no BS conversations with a bunch of different stakeholders in esports and gaming and blockchain and all this other stuff. So the metaverse. So definitely watch out for that. He's, it's free, so you can just go look at it on LinkedIn. Obviously, I like my old boss, Chris Hanna, when it comes to stuff, talking about stuff like NFTs and esports. Really sharp guy, great insights there. And obviously all of my former colleagues at TEO/SBJ are awesome. So you should really be reading their work.
And the Bing search engine.
And the Bing search engine. Get on that Bing search engine. No, but the MSN portal for esports is pretty good.
Yeah. Okay.
You should check that out. It has everybody that Double Tap is on there. Deserto, Esports Insider, any website you can imagine, it's on there.
Well, James Fudge, as we sign off for this week's episode, any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with, other than check out the Esports Advocate, of course, and check you out on Substack and follow you on Twitter at jfudge. But any other final thoughts that you wish to share this week?
Yeah, there's a couple of things, and it might take a little time. But
we're good. We're good.
I didn't answer your question about what parents can do.
Sorry, yeah, we did jump, and that's bad.
We jumped right past it. But I do want to say that there are a lot of kids right now playing Fortnite competitively, or trying to get into gaming or esports, and maybe they're looking at that as their future. And when parents look at it as a waste of time, or they should be doing something else, they should be outside, they really need to understand what their kids are doing and support them, because Like there are careers out there now in gaming and esports and content creation. So, I'm sure those same parents would be happy to uh, take part of their prize winnings if they go into Fortnite competitive and win big. So, really support your kids. If you do game, try and game with them. Um, I game with my son. It can be frustrating at times, but
My
but
son hunts me in Fortnite.
We've played a lot of Elden Ring together. So so yeah, just support your kids. And there's always still a path to college, even if if they want to stream on Twitch. There's things they can learn in college that'll help them do that better. How to create video, media training, so that they know how to act in front of a camera or during an interview. Writing, how to write a script for some idea that you have for content. So, or just general business, understanding how to operate your own business. So there's plenty of ways that college can still be a part of that.
Yeah.
But you should support your kids. If they were painting, you wouldn't knock the painting off the easel and say, "Get outside," right? So,
well, I would want them to have some balance. I mean, in all of this, we do also want to talk about balance, but you're saying, I think, to the parents is, don't, as I like to tell people, if you are passionate and you love something and somebody you care for, who cares for you and cares about you, tells you that what you are doing is a waste of time, that's psychologically crippling.
Yeah, no, it is.
Even as an adult,
right.
To be told that,
right. You should support your kids in whatever they want to do.
Right.
If they want to be a circus clown, send them to the school in Florida. I don't know, if that's what their passion is. I hate these parents that are like, I want my son to be a doctor or a lawyer, and they don't want to be. So, they're just that's just leading to someone's disappointment somewhere. But and the other thing I wanted to talk about was journalism itself. Like, there are a lot of great websites out there that do great work, but one of the things I learned over the last year or so in talking with editors and writers, some that are in positions and some that have been let go because there were a lot of layoffs. But one of the things I learned is, they don't have someone as an editor that's doing anything more than doing management and budgeting. So, like, we really need to think about what we can do to make content better, to train young people how to be journalists and how to write. And so, like, I'd like to see more websites or website owners take that role seriously and not just put some guy in there and expect him to be able to do the job.
Right.
So, I don't know how we accomplish that, because I understand you don't want to hire a seasoned editor. It's expensive, but if you're going to put somebody in the role, at least find a way to give them some training of some kind, so that they in turn can train other people to just be better at what they're doing. Because, for me as an editor, like, I want that person to go on and be better than I ever was. I want them to go work for whoever they want to work for. They want to go work for Vice or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post or Fox News or wherever. Like, I want them to be able to accomplish that if that's what they want to do. And they can't do that if we're not teaching them the basic skills on, how to be a journalist, how to be a better writer. So I see a lot of that. And I think a lot of it is it's a money decision. It's about money.
Yeah.
It kind of makes me sad.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that again, local journalism especially, but journalism in general, especially in this day and age when we need people we can trust, especially with the truth. I know that everybody seems to think that everybody has an angle. I don't believe that every journalist is like that. I think most journalists just want to share a good, compelling story. And again, what you kind of alluded to is the universalness of the skills that you're wanting to impart on people. The good writing, the good research, the good finding of sources. Those are things that no matter if you want to stay in journalism or you want to get into marketing or you want to be in business or start your own business, those are all things that are transferable.
Right.
Just because you're an esports journalist today doesn't mean you can't be the anchor of a cable news, or it doesn't mean that just because today you are the lifestyle, story writer of your local paper, doesn't mean that you're not going to break, Watergate. Those are obviously extreme examples, but again, all of these skills, I think, is what you're saying, are transferable. And again, it's better to support and grow the industry in a responsible way, as opposed to what I think we're seeing now, where a lot of tearing down. The thing I want to come back to real quick is you talked about citing sources. And even if you philosophically or personally disagree with the person, that doesn't make their source or their reporting any less important. It doesn't mean that they have to be torn down publicly. You can ask additional questions. You can go to those sources and ask them additional things, but it doesn't mean that you have to publicly tear this person down as a quote unquote bad journalist, if you will.
Right. No, you should listen. Always try and be as honest. Be honest. I was going to say honest as you can, but try to be honest, like be nice, be fair. And, it's all you can really do.
Well, James Fudge, as if it was a story about me, I know you covered by being hired by LeagueSpot, and I appreciate that you did that. I didn't ask that you do that, and that's not why you're here today. But I would ask that, James, if ever there was something about me and James was reporting it, I know and I believe that it would be honest, truthful, well-sourced, and published in a way that tells the whole story. I respect you as a journalist. I look forward to reading your things when you do post. Again, check out James, the Esports Advocate, or check him out on Substack. James Fudge of the Esports Advocate. Thank you for being a guest on the Academy of Esports podcast today.
That will do it for this week on the Academy of Esports. I've been your host, James O'Hagan. Esports are organized competitive video games allowing schools to redefine their athletic culture, diversify opportunities for student participation, promote good physical and mental health, increase collegiate scholarship pathways, and play games. We can never forget the importance of play. The mission of the Academy of Esports is to support these ideals. The vision of the Academy of Esports is for all students to experience the fun and joy of playing competitive video games. You may follow me on Twitter at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JimOhhagan, and through the Academy of Esports account at TAO Esports. It's a great way to get the latest blog posts, podcast episodes, and news coming out of esports and education. And remember, you can continue your engagement by going to www.taoesports.com. You can also connect through Facebook at www.facebook.com/TAO Esports. Thanks again for listening, and I look forward to our time again next week.